Hi guys, today I'm going to review or give my impressions on the new book that just came out by Yolande Norris-Clark, Portal, The Art of Choosing Orgasmic, Pain-Free, Blissful Birth. Now, this is just my interpretation of what I have read so far. I would say I've read maybe 80% of the book at this point, and I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about the book in the comments below. So I have been following Yolande Norris-Clark for many years. I think since about 2017. I was in the original Facebook group by Free Birth Society. And I'll never forget my first interaction with her personally, where I had posted a question. I was pregnant at the time with my second baby, and I was asking about a blood test and blood results and how they were being interpreted by my midwife at the time, who was a bit concerned about like my low hemoglobin count, I think, in my body. And she posted underneath, "Why do you think you need a midwife?" And at the time, of course, I thought that was the most radical thing I could be doing, was planning a home birth. My goodness. Was planning a home birth with a midwife, and that just seemed like as far out as you could get. But of course there is further out that we can go, and I did have a free birth with my son last year in 2022 with only my husband present and my children sleeping in the bedroom upstairs. I talk about this experience more in detail in my podcast, which I will post in the show notes below if you want to hear more about that. So this book is The Art of Choosing Orgasmic, Pain-Free, Blissful Birth through Free Birth. And a friend and I were talking about this book, and we were saying one of our comments is that it's like a pedestaling of free birth, of the experience of a woman birthing without any other person of authority in her space. So the way that Yolanda and Emily Saldea from Free Birth Society define free birth is that it is a birth where that is free of, like, the mother has the highest authority on birth in the space. So that means that in this way of defining it, like family can be present, family who doesn't necessarily have a lot of birth experience can be present, but not like a birth worker or a birth attendant or a radical birth keeper or something like that. Or definitely not a midwife or a someone working in the system. And they make it very clear that it's like two sisters, births with a birth attendant, like a traditional birth attendant who is perhaps not medically trained or working to forget their medical training, and birth alone, completely alone, where the mother is like 100% taking on the responsibility of the birth. And what my friend and I were saying was that this book, in the book, Yolanda even says she's trying not to pedestal or idolize free birth, and yet that's really what the book is about. It's about her personal journey, her deep spiritual personal journey of free birthing most of her children. I believe she had like a traditional birth attendant midwife with at least her first birth, and then her other 8 births. So she had 9 babies and is now pregnant with her 10th. 9 babies at the writing of the book were free births, so just her and her husband on their own. And so I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind when you're reading the book. Having worked with so many different women who are choosing different ways to birth, I feel like this has to be so held in our consciousness that this is a personal story of a woman who chooses free birth as her highest path of divine alignment, and as part of her spiritual path. And my personal belief is that every woman can have similar to these experiences that are in this book, while choosing very different paths, while having a birth attendant at their births, while having midwives at their births, while having, a C-section or even an OB birth. And I'm curious to have this debate and discussion with other women. I really am. Because as I support women and people through deep spiritual journeys, I'm also a quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner, QHHT by Dolores Cannon, which is a deep guided meditation one-on-one that lasts 2 hours. And in that deep meditation, I bring people to kind of deep brainwave states and explore different visions and physical experiences, completely without the need for psychedelics. It's really like a psychedelic trip without the psychedelics. And that's actually what birth is. And that is one thing that surprised me, that so I did love this book. I loved most of it, I would say. I love the detail with which she goes into her story. She talks about how for the birth of her 9th baby, the waters had opened and she decided to go swimming in the ocean with her children and her family. She was intimate with her partner. Of course, all these things the medical establishment would gasp at. But she just went and did what she felt like doing. And that's, something that she recommends. And I also recommend. I think she lives this at like another level than most women. And in some ways gives us permission by radically doing this. And that is one thing that I think the book really does, is it's like her full exploration of giving herself permission to be as radical, as spiritual, to have as much of a pain-free birth as she can experience, and to dive into that and then to explain to others how that happened for her. What I would love to see, I think, after this book is, I know that she's now kind of teaching this method, is seeing how it affects other women, and having a book that's more perhaps a compilation as to how different women have taken these concepts and applied them to their own births or to their own lives, because this is very like personal to her. And yeah, I would love to see more, I guess, diversity in people's journeys. So I think that this one journey is very useful and inspiring to us. But if we're not really fully individuated in ourselves and fully responsible in ourselves, then we're going to perhaps idolize and try to, copy paste certain aspects of the story into our own lives and into our own births. So what I wanted to speak to is this idea of choosing pain-free, blissful birth. And in her case, she spoke about like a portal, where she could just step into it. And she had always seen birth as like this hard thing to overcome and to just go through, and to feel really proud for having gone through it the way that she chooses to go through it. And that with her 9th baby, she kind of felt that there was a different option and chose a different option, and then had this completely pain-free orgasmic birth. Now, there are some women who have these experiences of their own, just of the spontaneously. And Emily Saldea and Free Birth Society, there actually has a podcast episode with a woman who had this experience with midwives. And so this again goes to show that it doesn't really matter. Well, I would say it does matter. It could be really hard to have an orgasmic pain-free birth in a hospital setting, but I would say perhaps not impossible. And in Free Birth Society, there's a woman who had an orgasmic birth experience, and this woman had actually never experienced an orgasm in her personal life. And that orgasmic pain-free birth opened up her sexuality for her to then experience orgasms with her partner afterwards. Like, isn't that incredible? It's incredible. And so that's what I would love to see pulled into this book, is maybe more diversity. But Yolande is very big on like free birth is the way and the only way and the best way. Okay, she says she's not, but she is. And I think that's okay, because that strong belief, well, okay, if she's watching this, she might say, no, I'm definitely not. I say that it's not, the best way for everyone, because she trains midwives she trains women to become radical birth workers, which are, kind of like traditional birth attendants, to hold deep spiritual space for women in birth. So she believes that there's a necessity for that service. And also always says that free birth is the way for her. So with my second baby, I kind of had that experience of being able to fully choose to surrender to the birth. I was feeling the sensations of birth. I was with my partner. It was getting painful. It was ramping up. And then I just decided, what if I surrendered and let go? What if I just let go completely? And I let go, and I could feel the waves coming through me, but because there was no more resistance, there was no more pain. It was a really, really cool experience that I will never forget. And I did have some kind of crazy cool psychedelic trip with her, with that birth. And then when that was over and I was ready to push, it was like a bam, like, you're back, your baby's coming, you need to wake up and be present. And in Birth is a Rite of Passage by Rachel Reed, which is a book I highly recommend. And I find that book is more accessible to women. It's kind of more inclusive of diverse experiences. There are different women who share their tidbits. She talks about how the brain shifts during birth, and that after the kind of psychedelic experience, adrenaline pops back in right before baby's arrival, because we have to be awake and aware to welcome the baby and to, help baby transition, basically. And so that was an incredible experience where there was fully that choice. And then my third birth, which was a birth after that experience I had already had, I didn't have that. It was actually it was more painful. From my husband's perspective, he says it was actually the smoothest, easiest birth that he's witnessed me go through. But my inner experience of that birth was that it was really unpleasant and more painful, and I couldn't find that space. So I don't know, is that because I had more stress in my pregnancy, or that I was stressed about free birthing? In the moment, I wasn't really thinking about those things, but I couldn't find that place. And so that's why I'm very curious as to, well, what Yolanda's next birth is going to be like, and also what other women's experiences are like applying these principles to their births. It's kind of a tricky thing, because she says that, pain-free birth is accessible and available to everyone. It's kind of like the message, you just have to get in the right frame of mind and do the inner work, and then it's accessible to you. And I think that can make women feel like if they don't have that, then they did something wrong, or they didn't do enough inner work, or they don't understand it enough. And I don't think that that's really that's really the truth of it. And I'm curious as to what Yolande would say with that kind of questioning, which is why this is one thing I find about, reading books like this and books going out into the world. When you're reading it, we can't really be having a dialogue and be challenging the reader as we go. We take all the information in and then we kind of discuss it within ourselves, but we can't get like more feedback about some of the questions. And so I would love to see maybe a podcast episode where women are maybe challenging her a little more. I've heard of some interviews, but yeah, maybe challenging her on some of these points. In the book, she talks about some spiritual experiences, of using different plants and medicines to have like shamanic journeys and trips and connecting with God. I really love this aspect of bringing source, creator, God, the divine, into birth and birth talk in the way that she does, because it's incredibly spiritual and also beautifully non-religious. And I love that. I really love the approach. I hope that we have more space for these kind of conversations. My personal births have been extremely divine and spiritual and deep spiritual experiences. She talks about her experience trying DMT and how DMT is released in birth, in orgasm, and in deep meditative states. And I have personally experienced those kind of things. There's one quote where she mentions, oh yes, where she's talking, I think, about her DMT trip. And she says, "It was years later that I began reading about quantum origination, regression, and soul retrieval. And while I'm still not entirely sure what I think about past lives or soul journeying, I find it fascinating. Somehow, the more my fundamental faith in God grows, the more at ease I am with not knowing the specifics of our origins or destinies after life. And yet, the more open I am to exposing myself to various theories on the subject." I thought this was cool because it talks to past lives, and of course that's part of the work that I do. And I think I love this theme of she's more at ease with not knowing, and that makes her more open to exploring. And I love this idea of non-attachment. And in my work with helping people explore their past lives, this is something that I talk about is this idea of not being attached to these stories, but rather integrating them and digesting them and using the fruits to improve our current lives, improve our understanding of the world, or how we relate to others, and not being so attached to them, because there's kind of always deeper and more to unravel to the story. And I believe in the work that I do as being very useful for pregnant women, and I'm very interested, and I have worked with prenatal and postpartum moms in doing this deep 2-hour one-on-one meditation technique to support them in a spiritual journey before birth. So not all women have had psychedelic trips before they give birth. And I find it's an interesting practice for helping people explore those worlds and those parts of themselves before they go there alone in birth. And also in postpartum, I've seen people access parts of the quantum that their mind wants to go to be able to understand more about their birth traumas or get some healing. For example, I had one woman who birthed with a birth attendant, and the placenta had some problems, and the cord broke when it was attempted to be pulled out from her. And so she went to the hospital to have the placenta removed, and it was a pretty tricky experience, difficult experience in the hospital. And when she came for QHHT, she saw herself accessing a past life and witnessing that personality birth a baby. That's what her higher self chose to show to her. And I thought it was so beautiful. And the birth was super straightforward, super simple, very mundane. That's what I felt, especially with my first home birth and even my second birth. It's very mundane. It's actually just part of life. It's very natural and smooth and uneventful, actually, when it just happens the way that it's designed to happen. And her higher self told her that she had she was too attached with this idea of like a home birth and it being like a really big deal. And it is a big deal in our culture because it is counterculture to what we're living in now, but it's not counter-human, right? And if we look at humanity in the whole scale of humanity, like hospital birth is a smidgen of how humans have been birthing. And so having that spiritual experience afterwards helped her see the stress and the attachment that she had put on her birth. And so I think that the beautiful, and Yolanda also talks about an incredible dream she had when she was considering abortion for her 5th child. I really love these deep diving into exploring these darker depths, you know, the positive and the negative of the dark, and bringing them forward to people. It kind of helps us be more open perhaps to our own experiences and journeys in that way. The book is is written with like a very high standard of English. I definitely feel a lot smarter reading it. And to me, it also feels like a bit tedious sometimes for my brain. So I feel like it's not a book personally that I would recommend to women in their last trimester of pregnancy. I would just state it to them as it is. You know, one thing I do think of doing is maybe highlighting the parts of the book that could be useful for women, the excerpts of them in the last stages of pregnancy, because it's a pretty thick book. And when I started reading it, I was like, wow, it's really great. The beginning was so interesting, a beautiful story of the unfolding of the birth of her 9th baby. And then I felt a little bit tedious. I felt it was a bit tedious and a little bit repetitive. But there are gems kind of all the way through. Like I said, her dream experiences, her DMT experiences, and I actually have not yet read the last chapter. I'm kind of peeking into it now and realizing, oh, there's some really incredible things in here. There were some other excerpts I wanted to share that are just so beautifully said. This is kind of summarizes the book a little bit. She was talking about the birth of her 8th child. I was still operating from the perspective that Iggy's birth was something that happened to me. She talks about that 8th birth as being really difficult. The truth is, I was afraid, and I was utterly unaware of having any power over my fear or power over how birth occurred for me in general. Like we often do, I had made myself an unwitting victim of the world and had single-handedly crafted, oblivious to having built it through my own being. I did not yet know how to skillfully bend time, what surrender truly meant and how to do it, how to connect with God, how to access my oversoul or guide self, how to choose bliss or beatitude as an ever-present option, how to dissolve pain, how sophisticated and reflexive my inadvertent commitment to victim consciousness was, or how to clear it, how to reinforce my energy field, how to connect with the soul of my baby, how to choose to function from a place of true self-leadership and mastery in the moment of dissolution, how to re-script the past, how to work with fear as an ally and as an access to power, how to collapse reality. And I found that summarizes like what the whole book is about. And not everyone's ready to, you know, be considering those things and be diving into them. One thing she mentioned was that when she first decided to step out of the medical system into free birth, it was like because she was really stepping out and away and against from the system, and that she eventually learned she had to relax into realizing that she was just choosing it because free birth is just the best way for her. It's the most loving thing and the safest thing from her perspective for her and her child. And I feel like I went through some of that with my decision to free birth. It was definitely, there were aspects of it that felt like it was a big like F you to the system. I was angry because of you know, what happened through COVID and what people in the medical industry had been encouraging pregnant women to do, how pregnant women were birthing with midwives and with doctors, with all the rules that were put around them. I just felt like I cannot support that system, and it's a bit of a like FU to the system to birth on my own. And I think I'm still digesting that, and I think that aspect of my birth is what made it more painful in a way. And I have recently had my bleed return, my postpartum bleed, my first menstruation postpartum. And the past month was really intense emotionally. And I've been feeling this energy that I really have to let go of victimhood and self-pity. I feel like sometimes I choose a hard path, homeschooling my kids, birthing the way I do, and it feels very lonely and hard because there's not much support from my family and community in a sense. And so I have a lot of self-pity around that and victimization. I think this is what this book is getting to. And so I decided this month that I really want to release that. I kind of had this weird meditation where I stepped through a light portal in the forest and just sloughed off all this gray, dusty, heavy, murky kind of energetic sheath from me. Just slough it off and walk in light and in love and in health and in vibrancy and in sovereignty and in self-responsibility. And with my bleed, one of the messages was that there's another baby coming. There's a fourth baby. And with my third baby, before even conceiving him, after my second birth, I knew there was a third baby coming. And even in that postpartum time, which was hard, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be harder. I'm going to have to go through this again. Like, that's so scary. I'm so scared. I know the third baby's coming. I know he's coming, and I'm so terrified. And I carried that for a while. Whereas with my second birth, I had the feeling that it was just going to be joyful and great, because my first birth was great, but the postpartum was very, very, very dark. And so I had this feeling that I have to have a second baby. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be joyful. It's going to be amazing. And it was. And she's a very joyful child. And then this third birth, it was like, again, this, you know, how far do you go into a radical life? And not feeling like you're pitying yourself and you're a victim to the culture and to your choices, right? And so choosing to free birth very much had this, like, I have to free birth because, one, I can't afford a birth attendant, and two, I'm actually going to get emotional, and two, because the systems are fucked and they fuck up with women. And so I want to step away from that. And there's a fourth baby coming, and I've heard from my inner voice that she's a very gentle, loving soul, like an artist, and she's going to bring a lot of softness to our family, and that it's just going to go well. It's just going to be well. It's like this deep inner knowing that it's just going to be good. And so I have no fear. And even though the free birth with my son wasn't as elating as I thought it was going to be, I have a feeling that I think that's what I'm going to be choosing with my fourth. I think I will have maybe hire some postpartum help, or just have that way better organized and be much more forthright with my family members as to what I need from them. And that it's just going to be good. And I think that that's what this book is getting to. So although I have some negative criticism about the book not being very accessible and perhaps some resistance to things, I think that's because I'm doing my own work of where I'm sitting with sovereignty and stepping out of victimhood. And so I'm going to be holding this and coming back to it and digesting it and improving my English and my elocution and vocabulary at the same time. Yeah, I have a signed copy, you guys. I got a signed copy. So there you have it. That's my little spiel and tidbit and thoughts about the book. I would love to know what you think, maybe get some kind of discussion going in the comments about what you guys think, what you agree with me on, what you disagree on. It's all open to be here, and much love with you on all of your journeys. Just know that however you birth, it's perfect and it's exactly for you and what you need in this moment, and for your baby as well. And they're involved in the whole process of it. Beautiful day.